Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Research Methods for Business. And in this session, we'll be looking at writing up your literature. This would actually help us in understanding how to navigate the technicalities of a literature review. Now, there are actually three stages of a literature review, and these three phases are organized along the lines of structuring your search, the construction, and the writing up. Now, in structuring your search, remember every good literature review must be able to address your research problem, right? There is no point reading and doing a review of everything in a particular field. My advice is that your literature review must be specific and it must be tailored towards addressing your research topic or the research problem. So in this sense, you should be able to filter your literature, looking at literature that actually helps you address any of the key questions or your key objectives. Literature that revolved around your chosen title or your chosen topic. So in this sense, you must be able to identify the type of literature that would be useful for the knowledge you seek to acquire. Now, in deconstructing and evaluating material, you must be able to critique work, right? You must be able to look at what has been said by different authors in an objective stance, right? You must be able to critique, you must be able to understand, dissect, you must be able to ransack that work, you must be able to evaluate and say, yes, this is what this author is saying, this is why they said it, and this is why this is quite important to my work. So the first stage is structuring your search, ensuring that your search is consistent with your research questions, your research aim and objectives, right? The second stage is deconstruction and evaluation of material, whereby you are evaluating relevant literature and you are going ahead to critique it and ensure that you are able to articulate or streamline the knowledge in that area. And the final stage is where you are reconstructing the work, you are synthesizing the contributions, you are generalizing the contributions towards identifying the gap in knowledge which your project or which your research tries to address. So let's proceed to the next slide. Now, when you want to think about how to undertake your literature review, what I've done is I've put up this schematic presentation. So first of all, you must have a plan. And as they say, failure to plan is planning to fail. So you must have a plan. And your plan involves you writing down the aims of your review. So what is the aim of my review? What does my review want to achieve? What is it I want to achieve? What are my main points? Right? What is it that I want to achieve in my literature review? I want to be able to find studies, relevant studies that would help me address the research problem, help me address the research objective, and of course, my research aim. And these papers or these articles, journals from books or conference proceedings must be tied to my topic, right? And of course, this must have been done with a pre-writing. So you must have a pre-writing whereby you're structuring your review. Now, you must be able to also draft out a structure. Okay, so these are the topics I want to address, right? This is what I've read. Okay, I think this topic might be useful for me. Okay, this subheading might be good. I might talk about this. I might talk about this theory first. I might speak about entrepreneurship in this light. So you have a draft of some structure, right? Some appropriate headings that would guide you. And a very good approach to literature review is using section headings, right? These section headings helps you articulate relevant knowledge, helps you articulate relevant material to your points. And within these subheadings, what you do is from your readings, you are able to allocate appropriate evidence to those key subheadings or those key sections. Now, after that, you now start to build your first draft, right? And in building your first draft, you are streamlining your work. Remember, the literature review, like I mentioned in part A, is an iterative process. You are going back and forth to ensure that the relevant studies that you've selected are quite relevant, quite conversant, and help you summarize or establish the main points. Then after that, you move on to writing a final draft. Right, so there's nothing to be scared about it. I think literature review is all about practice. It's all about practice. And like I say, a good way to navigate your literature review is by looking at what people have done before. right? See the way they've articulated it, the way they've structured it, the way they've critiqued work, their arguments, right? What relevant theories have they used? And of course, at the end, you must be able to identify a gap, right? So practice enhances the way you write your literature review. Now, don't forget, right? Literature review is not a couple of things, right? So literature review is not a list of journal articles. No, no, no. I see a lot of students say, yes, Dr. King, I've done literature review. And what they've done is they've put the whole work in a table form, and they just want me to read from the table. No, that is not what a literature review. It's not a list of journal articles. No, right? A literature review is a description of key studies, right? But of course, these key studies must be done in a narrative format, right? And it must be critically reviewed, right? It must be critically reviewed. So you critically review key studies that relate to your chosen topic, right? And of course, you should continue reading and reviewing throughout the project. And that leads us to that iterative aspect of a literature review, where you go back and forth because you're reading, you're reviewing, right? And you're saying, well, this works for me, this doesn't work for you. Well, I included this earlier on, but I think within the ambit of this study, it doesn't relate very well. I would need to take it out. So, literature review includes analysis, includes a synthesis, includes comprehension, and of course, ability to capture knowledge. Now, in analyzing every literature, a good way is to be able to select, is able to be differentiate, ability to differentiate, dissect, and break up. Now, in analyzing any literature review, a very good approach is by breaking up extant studies that you've read, right, into different parts, right, or into different subheadings, like we pointed out, towards determining the relationship, right, and organizing the principles between them, right. So in analyzing your work, what you're able to do is you're selecting key work or key studies that relate to your work. You're able to differentiate them under different headings and identifying the ones that work for you most. In dissecting, you're saying, yes, this applies to my work. Yes, this doesn't really apply to my work, but I can actually take some insights here, right? And you break it up. In breaking up, what you're trying to do is articulating them into different headings, right? So that it kind of guides your work. But of course, every good literature review contains a good critique of what people have said and how this relates to your topic. Now, in synthesizing academic work, another good approach is ensure that you integrate, you combine, you reorganize, you formulate. So what you're trying to do here is that you're ensuring that you arrange all the elements derived from analysis to identify the relationships, right? So when you get particular studies from academic work, you try to identify, oh, this is what this author was saying, and it's kind of similar to what this author had said earlier on. So there seems to be a relationship. So I can say, for instance, West in 2015 points out that authentic leadership is unique in its own way. And this is also similar to what DJ Khaled in 2015 pointed out, that authentic leadership provides a unique element towards supporting employees towards achieving goals. So you see that from different authors, from different work, there seems to be a relationship between those arguments, right? So you can actually bring those arguments together so that you're actually integrating your work and showing how these key definitions or key arguments help you to make a good analysis or good insight. So in this form, you are actually synthesizing what you've been able to read. But a good approach is that you must be able to understand, you must comprehend, right? And one of the challenges you find with academic studies, especially journals, is that they're quite scientific, and sometimes if you're not conversant with reading journals, you might struggle, right? I remember when I started reading journals, it was like I was reading Latin. It used to be very confusing, but what I learned was that it was all about practice, and when you read the first time, you might not comprehend, but you always have to read the second or third time to start to piece the puzzles together. So in comprehend, it's all about practice. You must be able to understand and explain and distinguish and interpret, right? You must be able to interpret and understand different data, different arguments, right? You should be able to also describe them, explain, discuss in various ways what that work has done. But of course, understanding, being able to explain, being able to distinguish, be able to interpret is quite important. But of course, this has to do with practice. Now, in terms of knowledge, you must be able to define, right? Definitions, very key, right? Definition, you must be able to define, you must be able to describe, you must be able to name, recognize, become aware of, understand. You must solve problems, right? So what are the key principles? What are the key arguments? What is the knowledge, the relevant knowledge in this field? What are the key theories, right? What are the key methods? What have I been able to analyze? What have I been able to learn? What are the meanings of this concept? How have they been applied? Right? You must be able to define, you must be able to describe. Very important. Key literature review process, good snapshots, right? You must be able to strike a balance, right? I've seen students whereby in their proposals or in their dissertations, they've only focused on reports, right? The idea is that there must be a balance. You must be able to strike a balance between reports and academic literature and, of course, theory. So you must be able to strike a balance. Don't rely on one particular source of review or source of literature, or source of information. Right. For instance, in one of the papers I marked a few years ago, the student focused the literature review particularly on government reports. There must be a balance between theory. There must be a balance between academic sources and policy work or relevant white papers or document. There must be a balance, right, in your literature review. A strong balance, very key. And of course, there must be that linkage. Now, structure of literature review, of course, you must introduce your literature review, introduce the key concepts. I always like to start off with my theory, right? Why are you writing a review? Why is that topic important? What is the scope? What are you trying to capture? Right? What will be discussed? What criteria will be used? Right? The structure to be written. Usually, the literature review starts with that, right? Then you must have paragraphs, body paragraphs. Right, each body should deal with a sub-theme, right? Like the headings I mentioned to you, right? Synthesize several of your reviewed readings into a paragraph. So if you have a heading on entrepreneurship, you have that heading on entrepreneurship. What are the key readings? What are the key arguments? What are the key discourse, the key narratives that you found out under entrepreneurship? The next, you can talk about gender. What are the key things that have been discussed around gender? What are the key arguments, the key discourse, the key debates, right? And you critically analyze each source for how they contribute to the themes you've been researching. And remember, this must be supported with appropriate references. And you conclude, right, what are the key arguments or disagreements? But of course, what are the gaps, right? Of course, within the study, these gaps were identified. However, right, more has to be done within the context of a developing market context. And with this in mind, this study or this report or this proposal, we go ahead to examine this gap, something like that, right? So in that part, what you're trying to do is you're introducing your overall perspective, right, on this topic, right, and how this will inform your study. So quick snapshot, funnel approach here. What's the main contextual features of the topic, right? What are the key ideas behind your topic? Right, what are the overview? Provide an overview of the key ideas of your topic. Summarize, critique, contrast the key work of authors. Narrow down, right? So you narrow down to your own research. How do these contextual features, this overview of ideas, these comparisons and contrast of key work, how do they relate to your research? So here you are narrowing down to highlight the work that is most relevant to your research. Then at the final stage of the funnel, you are highlighting any areas where your research will provide fresh insight. So that is where you identify the gap and say, yes, based on this study will contribute by examining entrepreneurship from an emerging market context, something like that. So your literature review, what you need to do, quick points. Refer to and assess research by recognized experts. Consider and discuss research that supports or opposes your idea. Justify your argument with valid evidence, right? Valid evidence. You must use valid evidence in a logical matter, right? For instance, Michael, Kanye, and King mentioned that this. So you must support with examples, support with evidence. Kanye and King in 2015 argued that entrepreneurship provides insight towards the development of an economy. You know, in a similar way, Broomfield and Michael, I argue that although you kind of use those evidence to support your discourse in a logical manner, right? Distinguish between fact and opinion, and what I say a lot of students is they focus much on opinion, on what they think, No, right? You must be very careful, right? We need facts. Facts are quite important. Include key academic theories, very, very important, and concepts in your chosen area. Demonstrate that your knowledge is relevant and up to date, right? What I see students is that they always go far into the past and bring papers of 1950s or 1920s or 1930s. It's always good to use up-to-date material. It is acknowledged that those studies done in the 50s or in 60s, there will have been new breakthroughs, new up-to-date knowledge that would remedy any challenges or any problems those previous studies will have highlighted. And of course, you must reference, right, to avoid plagiarism so I don't get into trouble, right? I don't want my students getting into any trouble, right? Stylish academic writing applies, right? Catchy opening paragraphs, right? Catchy opening paragraphs. You must be able to clue the readership. You might be able to clue the audience. You must be able to catch them with the catchy paragraphs, right? Use concrete nouns as opposed to abstract nouns, right? Active and energetic verbs to illustrate, to examine, to investigate. Use examples, for instance, right? For example, use examples, very key, right? Use references, right? Short or mixed length sentences. Carefully avoid the use of jargon, right? Avoid use of jargon, right? Plain English preferred. Keep it simple, right? I remember when I used to be a student, I used to write long sentences. And the challenge with long sentences is that it makes your work very boring and difficult to comprehend. So keep your sentences short, succinct, straight to the point, not too long, because if it gets too long, it becomes difficult to understand. And of course, your story must be able to create a compelling narrative. So to round up, right, the key to critical literature review is to link the different ideas you find in literature, right, to form a coherent and cohesive argument which sets in context and justifies your research. So here what you're trying to do is you're trying to compare and contrast different views, right? Don't forget, use examples. You always use examples, use evidence. You must be able to distinguish between facts and opinions. Remember, your literature review must be articulated under themes, under subheadings, right? There's so much information. There's a plethora of studies. But what you need is the useful ones, the ones that would actually help you address your research problem, literature review that is most relevant to your research topic, right? So, and there are so many useful tips to help you navigate them. The key is to start now, be organized, don't be scared, don't pass out. It is achievable, but it's all about practice, practice, practice. So I'll see you guys later on. Speak to you soon and have a lovely day.